Hello, my name is Dr. Kajit John Paul, and I have been asked several questions over the last couple of days, and I want to address two of these questions. The first is, how do I join the movement for cognitive justice? That's Mr. Robbie Williams from London, an entrepreneur in London. And the second is in relation to the conflicts, the recurrent conflicts and killings in Jos, Plateau State, central Nigeria. I'm interested in knowing the root cause of the crisis and the best way of solving it. Teritong from Jos, a colleague of mine. Now, the first question, Mr. Robbie Williams, London. Before telling you how to join the movement for cognitive justice, let me read again what the movement is to you, as written on the website. It says, first of all, we start with a quote from Albert Einstein. Our objective is to change the world, make it more peaceful. It says, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. Albert Einstein. And now, the movement for cognitive justice, MCJ, seeks to assemble individuals and organizations who aspire for a just, equal, sustainable, and truly peaceful world. It seeks to organize these positive forces into a global, domestic, and intercultural movement for making a new, just, equal, and peaceful Pluriversal World Order. Now, central to the way the movement articulates itself is the question of diversity. Should diversity, plurality, that is, having many different nations, languages, peoples, ideas, ways of thinking, specialisms, knowledges, should diversity be a problem or an asset? Should diversity be good or bad? Should diversity be a clog, a hindrance, or an enhancement, an asset? Now, we think the world as presently constituted has a way of looking at things in which, for the main part, diversity is a problem. And it seeks ways, especially the diversity of peoples, languages, and cultures. Our political philosophies mainly problematize diversity and try to work against them. It's an upstream climb, so we have lots of conflicts. Now, we in cognitive justice have developed and are developing a political philosophy by which diversity is a beautiful thing, is an asset upon which political social society is built. Now, the problems addressed by cognitive justice on different fronts manifest in different ways. In Africa and parts of the global south, it might be conflict, inter-ethnic or religious conflict. In the global north, places like the UK, it might be the issue of equality of the different nations that make up the UK. Scottish independence, quest for independence, the Welsh question, how to address Northern Ireland, the people in Cornwall, and also other issues like how to address racism, inequality, the gaps in poverty. The similar issues with different shades of peculiarity would manifest in the context of North America, for example, the Caribbean. In Asia, you have the problems, the dominant problems you find in places like Africa, replicated in Asia, in Burma, as Myanmar, and India with its numerous peoples as well. So we articulate it in different ways that address specific domestic context. That's why it is global, it is domestic, and yet it is intercultural. Now, you join the movement for cognitive justice by indicating an interest, just like you have sent an email to us asking us how to join. Now, you should just be aware that we have three major stages in building the movement and transforming the world from its present violent, unequal state to what we want, the peaceful, more humane, sustainable state. The first stage is awareness and foundation building. That's where we are. And it is planned to take us 2 years, 2017. So at this point, we will send you the materials you need to print cards and join in creating awareness. And who knows, you might be part of the actually Europe front, where the UK comes in. I will come back to the movement for cognitive justice towards the end of this little video. But let me respond to Tertong's question about Jos. He said, I'm interested in knowing the root cause of the crisis and the best way of solving it. 1. The root cause. 2. The best way of solving it. Before telling you what I think of the root cause of the conflict in Jos, let me just give you an overview of what has been done to solve these problems of conflict. Before telling you what has been done as well, I will just draw your attention to the fact that conflicts in Jos, the middle belt of Nigeria, the whole of Nigeria, the whole of Africa, and most of the global south takes different forms. One could be ethnic, which is basically about ethnic identity. It could be religious, purely religious, or ethno-religious. When it is ethnic in the context of Plateau State, Nigeria, generally speaking, you find like sometimes inter-ethnic or intra-ethnic. Inter-ethnic between one ethnic group and another, such as the Gure-Kahugu crisis of 1984. Intra-ethnic is within the same ethnic group. Ife, Modakeke, Aguleri, Umuleri, those are prominent conflicts. Tiv Jukun crisis. These are conflicts that are not much spoken about because the religious conflicts tend to take the preeminent position in terms of attention. You have, in terms of ethnic conflict, you have issues of territory, land, who owns the land, autonomy. Why should we be under somebody else? Our traditional institution deserves to be recognized. Cultural festivals and so on. Religious conflicts could be intra-religious, like within the same religion, Sunni, Shia, members of the same religion fighting over offices or position, whose doctrinal postulation is correct and who is wrong. That's intra-religious. And inter-religious, Muslims versus traditionalists, like you had in the Hausa land before the jihad. The original leaders and rulers and founders of Hausa land, the states in Hausa states, where the Habe rulers, they were not Muslims, they were traditionalists. And there was a very brutal conflict. You see some of the details in Henrik Bart's account when he traveled in that area, how brutal it was. You have Christians versus Muslims, Christians versus traditionalists, like some extremists in the south of Nigeria, even recently, go about burning shrines. That's inter-religious as well. Muslims versus Buddhists, which was quite an extensive conflict. Recently, some Muslims destroyed the Buddha, the image of the Buddha in Afghanistan. That's also a manifestation of that dimension of inter-religious. Then you have the traditional religion hybrid, like the recent Ombat prayer group in Egong, among the Egong people, the Egong nation. It was like some form of self-determination, but assumed a religious garment, and not very common, but there it is. Then you have ethno-religious, where ethnicity blends with religion and manifests in different forms of conflict, and that's what you have, for the most part, in Jos Plateau State. Now, the measures, before we talk about the solution, what measures has the state in Nigeria adopted to solve these problems of conflict? I have identified and categorized 3 types of measures. First is security, judicial second, and conciliatory third. I further categorize the security measures into pre-conflict, during conflict, and post-conflict security measures taken by the state to solve problems of conflict. Pre-conflict include intelligence gathering, day-to-day policing, and a new culture that was developed within the last 10-20 years in Nigeria called Friday deployment of troops and extra military forces, because Muslims tend to pray, gather in large crowds, sometimes blocking roads on Fridays. The volatility is usually in the air, so it's a matter of state policy. It has become quite established in Nigeria now. Very many parts of Nigeria. When I was in Zaria, Kaduna, Plateau, you see those trends. Then during conflict, deployment of more security personnel, imposition of movement restrictions or curfews, which could be absolute or partial, and states of emergency like you have in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe states at the moment. These are during conflict. But then, courtesy of Boko Haram, in terms of those examples I just cited. Then you have post-conflict security measures, which include increased preventive deployments, identification of flashpoints and stationing of military forces there, setting up of joint task forces. You have several of them operating at the moment, and similar post-conflict measures, meetings, security meetings to address the issues on a sometimes weekly, bi-weekly basis. The judicial measures include the prosecution of arrested or indicted individuals, setting up of panels, commissions of inquiry, and committees. And finally, the conciliatory measures include setting up of government departments and agencies, committees to look into these to facilitate dialogue, discourse amongst conflicting or potentially conflicting communities. And you have NIREC in Nigeria. You have the different states have their own bodies that they set up. And in 2012, when I organized the conference at Ariwa House in Kaduna under the auspices of the Edinburgh Center for Constitutional Law, which funded the conference, I did encounter the office of the Special Advisor to the Governor on Peace Building, but that was for Plateau State alone, Mr. Timothy Parlong, which I thought was a good idea. About the conference, it was about using law to facilitate peace building. The keynote speaker was Professor Mohammed Taufik Ladan. We had Professor Stephen Nkom from Sociology, ABU Zaria as the analyst. Senator Ahmed Mohammed McAfee was the chairman, who was ably represented by a member of the House of Representatives, the state governor of Kaduna State, present through his Attorney General, the VC of Bauchi, ATB Bauchi, came, as well as several other people. Now, why have these measures, three of them, security, judicial, and conciliatory, not worked? Well, we have to first say that they appear not to have worked before we now ask why have they not worked. Maybe because they don't really address the main issues, the root issues, and maybe because the structure of the state itself is not constructed to have the capacity to address these issues. Now, in further highlighting the defects of these measures, talking about the security measures, for example, you find out that there are instances where security personnel are also implicated. They end up taking part in the conflict. In fact, there is a report which indicted the 2002 Justice Nikki Toby Commission of Inquiry. He was talking about one Alhaji Dahiru Sule in Jos, who was arrested with a gun and granted bail. This is what the commission said. Another disturbing aspect is the way the witness procured bail. There were many accused persons put in custody, police custody, but not this witness. He had the golden wings to fly away to freedom. He had a red carpet treatment. That's on page 105 of the white paper to that Commission of Inquiry, paragraph 4.80. Then also you also had the Commissioner of Police indicted Mohammed D. Abubakar. Justice Nikki Toby said religious fanatics should not be posted to head police commands. The Commission recommends that for his ignoble role during the September 2001 crisis, which resulted in the loss of lives, the former Commissioner of Police, Plateau State Commander Alhaji M.D. Abubakar, be advised to retire from the Nigeria Police Force, and in the event of his refusal to do so, he should be dismissed from the service. He went on to become the Inspector General of Police regardless. And that tells you a little bit about how the system works, how these measures don't really add up. Now, you find the root causes. When you look at these reports, they are there. We understand them. People understand them. The people who were part of those commissions understand the issues. And that means the understanding of the fact is not the problem, but having a framework that is able to meet the aspirations of the different conflicting groups on an equal basis is the problem. But before talking about that, let me give you a clue, a picture into these root causes. First, before that, I looked at 16 reports, 8 from Kaduna State, 5 from Plateau State, 3 from Bauchi State of different conflicts. For Plateau, the first was a 1994 crisis and the Justice Fabersima Commission of Inquiry set up. The immediate causes, now there's a distinction between immediate causes and remote causes. The immediate causes are like the last drop that makes the cup overflow, or the last straw that breaks the camel's back. So the immediate cause may be the one that draws the first punch, but it only, acts or stands upon a heavy load of pre-existing remote causes that are the deeper underlying serious issues that actually are the root causes. The immediate cause for the 1994 crisis was the appointment of Alhaji Aminu Mato as Chairman Caretaker Management Committee of Jos North Local Government by the federal government, to the delight of the Muslims, Hausa Fulani Muslims, and to the chagrin of the indigenous Biromanaguta and Afiziri. Now, the more important remote causes were: 1. Contest over ownership of Jos; then attempt to exercise dominance by the Hausa Fulani over indigenous peoples of Jos; creation of Jos North Local Government by the federal government as requested by the Hausa Fulanis, to the disregard of the wishes of the indigenous Biromanaguta and Afiziri. Then, going on to 2001, you see over 1,000 people were killed. The immediate cause was the attacks on a lady by name Rhoda, who was trying to cross a road when Muslims had occupied the place to pray, and she was assaulted. And at Congo, Russia, I don't know where it is. And also the appointment of one Alhaji Mukhtar Usman Mohammed as the National Poverty Eradication NAPEP Program Coordinator for Jos North Local Government by the federal government. So you see, these are by the immediate causes. The remote causes, again, like a deja vu from 1994, ownership of Jos, indigenship, efforts at Islamization, delimitation of electoral wards to favor some against others, blockage of roads by churches and mosques during prayers and worship, indiscriminate use of loudspeakers in places of worship, Fulanis trespassing in farmlands in Plateau State, alleged discrimination against Muslim, Hausa and Fulani, non-implementation of the previous report. Going on to the Plateau Peace Conference, which was in 2004, looking at the series of conflicts from 2001 onwards, leading on to the declaration of a state of emergency and the suspension of the governor, Joshua Dari, you find very extensive discourse. Over 1,000 people were killed, of course. You find numerous immediate causes, and you find the remote causes also very similar to the immediate, but then you find other deeper underlying issues in the interior of the plateau where the ethnic conflict dimensions come up. In 2008, you've had the Justice Ajibola Commission, which found immediate causes to be attacks by Hausa Fulanis in Ali Kazauri, area of Jos, and the reaction by Christians. But then the remote causes, again, the deeper real causes were the same: ownership of Jos, indigenship, previous reports in implementation, and so on. And finally, 2010, Chief Solomon Lar of memory, Presidential Advisory Committee, over 1,000 people killed, the immediate cause being local government elections, the remote causes being just a replica of the previous causes. Now, those are the root causes. Those are generally the root causes. Now, if you want to put these causes in a very concise language expression, what would it be? Well, there will be different opinions. But in our own cognitive justice way of thinking, cognitive justice being the right to the equal recognition and treatment of different identities. in any political society. The root cause would be the absence of a political philosophy, a constitutional theory, and a legal construct which has the capacity to meet the needs of diverse identities equally. So anything that looks like a solution to solve will look like a deepening of the problem to others. So the root causes. Now, what's the best way of solving this? The security measures have failed. The judicial measures appear to be failing. The conciliatory measures you discussed today, and within a week there's another attack, they would appear to be failing. It would look to us in cognitive justice way of thinking that the entire construct of the Nigeria as a nation state lacks an enabling justice theory, political philosophy, and an institutional construct that resonates with the yearnings of the people, and so it spits out conflict. Casting your mind back to a previous video where we referred to Marjorie Perham, who said in 1904 there were no houses of Fulanis in Jos, but thanks to the Pax Britannica, the colonial British peace, they could move around and settle amongst the Pagans and graze their cattle. And today we have these conflicts, and ownership has come up. Now, also remember that the construct of northern Nigeria and Nigeria as a whole was positioned within the British imaginary of building homogeneous identity. Diversity was simply a problem. And just to give you an example, if you look at the movie The Last of the Mohicans, when the English officer came to see the Scottish general who had the daughters, he saw the general discussing with one of the Indian people's scouts. He said, "You are negotiating with Indians? I thought British policy was to make the world English." So you see, that way of thinking. Now in northern Nigeria, they try to crystallize a single notion of identity. First of all, it has to be Islam. Then it had 4 ruling tribes: Hausa, Fulani, Kanuri, and Nupe. The others were considered as marginal. So in Jos and other parts that were predominantly non-Muslim, diversity was simply a problem. And you find the Willing Commission defining northern Nigeria along those lines. And even though someone like Justice Nikki Toby in 2002 made a pronouncement about the ownership of Jos, saying, you see it, that's in that the white paper to that report, page 43. He said, "The story of ownership of Jos told by the propagandists of Hausa Fulani ownership of the former Tin City is like the literature story of Alice in the Wonderland. Happily, this commission will not wander. It will arrive at a proper and correct destination with the assistance of a good compass." Now, he eventually went on to say it belongs to the indigenes and there should be ways of promoting dialogue. Now, what the Nigeria as a post-colonial nation, as a colonial construct, lacks the political philosophy to recognize diversity. So in cognitive justice, we've developed this framework which kind of exposes the real issues and then proposes a solution. And the solution lies in reorganizing the political society in such a way that the political order and the legal order that arises actually arises from the will and the express wish of the people. And we need a new regime of rights. The indigenes have certain claims that nobody should contest, but everybody who is a citizen of a political construct should have residency rights that should not be contested either. Now, these don't need to clash unnecessarily, but they need to flow from the will of the people. And so we propose the idea of a plurinational state, where every identity that was reduced to a kind of a lower category called a tribe should actually be a nation. And the state should not be a nation state, because a nation as a people with a common language, history, culture, and a claim to autonomy simply doesn't exist. We have many nations. We need to radically reorganize, reconceptualize, rethink, and restructure our political order. to respect the diversity of the peoples. So the state needs to cease being a nation state. That is a total misnomer. It's a misplacement of words. Awolowo identified this in his People's Republic and in his Thoughts on the Nigerian Constitution, page 91 and 92 of that book. That's Thoughts on the Nigerian Constitution, Thoughts on the Nigerian Constitution. He identified this issue. Although in my research, I also have, I pick issues with his approach to building order. That's the colonial approach, is to impose order, to sit down, get the paper, draw lines and tell you this is the maps we have given you. I think it will be more legitimate when the people themselves express what they want to be their borders. The idea of multiplicity is not a problem. We have 774 local governments. There are 774 local governments in Nigeria. So multiplicity of administrative units is not an issue. How they are to be constituted is the issue. When you constitute them to ignore indigeneity, the identity diversity, to refuse to recognize it and seek to replace it and wipe it out, then you have a problem. But when you think about it in ways that recognize and entrench overlapping, mutually coexisting regimes of rights that do not necessarily need to clash, then you have a potential template for a solution. I wouldn't talk much about this. This is an area of my expertise. If those who are promoting this movement, and we ultimately want to promote peace building, equality, justice and sustainability, and we hope to engage you at different levels in this regard. Now back to the movement for cognitive justice. We have structured the movement to reflect the ideal of a pluriversal world order. That's back to the first question. Now, the present world order is complicit in most of the conflicts there are at different parts of the world, the issues of sustainability, even the economic models being used. Now, we'll talk about this more in the future. But I'll finish this video with this affirmation of the movement for cognitive justice. It's simply this, and it's a kind of a way of summing up our idea of restructuring the world into a pentagonal order, 5 levels, which I'll talk about subsequently. And this is our affirmation. The movement for cognitive justice proclaims and affirms as follows: humanity's potentials and capacity for recognition, justice, equality, and peace are yet untapped. This is the stronger human component, the noble, meritorious, and laborious path. Conversely, humanity's inclinations and impulse for injustice, vice, inequality, discrimination, domination, exclusion, conflict, and war have been overstretched. This is the weak human component, very easy to effortlessly indulge, empty of honor, merit, or benefit, except what is fleeting, what is dross and unsustainable, actually decayed, but masked as good, benefit, or progress. And it grinds humanity in misery and consternation. Now the quest for us lies with the noble who have a vision of a just and better world, a quest which is undertaken not through violence, inequality, or the quest to dominate others, but through critical thinking, positive engagement, and the recognition of the immense diversity and positive potentials of humanity. It is that resolute optimism which would never surrender the banner which proclaims a better world is attainable. Now, this is what we seek to do in cognitive justice, the movement for cognitive justice.